Starting recording. Updating information. Starting streaming. Not that it matters. Cool. So we are live to, I'm going to go ahead and guess, 0 people. Who are you?
Well, first off, Joe, thanks for having me. My name is Alioune N'Gom. I'm the founding director of the New York Society of Play. Just a nerd that's been doing nerd stuff in New York City for the last 10 or 12 years. 12 years. And that includes, a little bit of everything. Some board game design, some work in various LARP and trading card game scenes, doing some organizing, some participating, some content creation. Yeah, and that's sort of my whole deal.
So we met 5 years ago? Is
Yeah,
that
I'd say it was
right?
about 5 years ago, back when we were working for Game Lab.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Wow, that was 5 years. Fuck.
That was some amount of time,
That
yeah.
was a long time. So you said you were been doing this for 10, 12, so that would have put you at 5, 7 prior to that. Where did you, where did you like get started?
So, I got started, really, really got started, hanging out around local card game and comic stores as a kid.
Okay.
That was just sort of like my local haunt. As a young teenager, you'll, do anything to get out of the house and find somewhere. And, that started out as the library where I'd play a whole lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! And a whole lot of Pokemon. And then I found a local card game store in my community. It was really just like an old, gift store that somebody's parents had gifted them because they had a bunch of like retail real estate in the area. And next thing you know, just like a bunch of like really hardcore TCG players just started flocking there, and that was like the stomping ground. And from there, just like being really into trading card games. It First off, I don't know, it was just a really interesting perspective because it gave me a way of being really interested in sort of like the meta narrative around sort of the formation of fandoms
Hmm.
and why nerds like the things they do, and sort of how that ends up shaping the landscape. So as a kid, one of the things that you realize when you're playing trading card games is they cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you'll try and find like the best ratio of like time to value to how good am I at the game compared to like all of these other games,
Yeah.
Like if you just really bottom out at a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament, you just be like, this sucks. I'm gonna go play Pokemon where people think I'm smart, you know? Um,
Just
so
cycling through CCGs for self-esteem.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But the thing is, what I would notice when cycling through these is the demographics were like night and day.
Hmm.
And I think that I realized this more than anything when making my first switch from Yu-Gi-Oh to Magic the Gathering. And it hit
Oh
me
yeah.
like a ton of bricks
Yeah.
because I grew up in Los Angeles and in New York and like in public schools, and Yu-Gi-Oh was like the thing, lots of black and brown
Hmm.
Asian kids, right? And the reason I switched off of Yu-Gi-Oh wasn't even necessarily because I was like bummed out on the game, but because like staples were like $100 a piece,
Sure.
like cards that you needed three of to like hang in any tournament. They were like $100 because of price gouging and short printing and
I remember.
Konami.
Oh yeah.
Konami is Konami, so that's a thing. But I was just like, I've had enough. I'm switching over to this other game because the cards look better made, and it seems like there's like it's more balanced. But I was like, wow, everyone's white.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, why is that? And I was like looking at like I was new to Magic, so I was looking at like the advertisements, the lore, the history, and something hit me. Magic doesn't have a TV show for starters.
Hmm.
Yu-Gi-Oh has a TV show, which means that it is more it's more palatable and more accessible to what I like to call first generation nerds.
Hmm.
People who started like delving into nerd stuff of their own will and volition, maybe even against the support of their family or friends. And then you have what I like to call legacy nerds, people who have older figures in their life or in their support system who can like show them the good stuff, you
Hmm.
know. And I was noticing, especially with people my age, a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh people were first generation nerds of color,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of the people who were into Magic were legacy nerds who were white, who maybe had like an older brother with like a comic book collection or
Mm-hmm.
something. And because a lot of the advertising that would come through with Magic was in very exclusive venues,
Mm-hmm.
Dragon Magazine, comic books like trade paperbacks.
Done
Uh,
only at on site at a hobby store.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was very exclusive
Mm-hmm.
for what it was. And I think that there's been a push since like when I started playing in like 2008 to be more inclusive because Yu-Gi-Oh! And other games like that were kind of eating their lunch.
Oh
And
yeah.
there was that second resurgence in 2010 of just like another explosion of card games. Like we thought we were done. We were
Yeah, we
like,
thought
these,
the CCG bust had wiped out the landscape, but nope, they all came
yeah,
back.
nope. They all came back. Vanguard came back and saw a bunch of success, and then everyone else was like, "I want to get back on that." Dragon Ball Z card game is getting a reboot.
Which is wild to me. That
UFS is getting a reboot. Final
UFS is
Fantasy
getting a
card
reboot?
UFS is seeing sets printed out again. Yeah, it's nuts, and the art is still amazing. And what else? What else is seeing a reboot? Final Fantasy card game is fairly popular now.
Like the
Um,
FF8 one?
no, 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 not like Triple Triad.
Okay.
I'm talking like there is now a Final Fantasy trading card game that just kind of like takes stock images from all of the Final Fantasy games and give them stat blocks. And I guess the if that's what it is, that means the mechanics must be pretty on point. If
Yeah,
it's
seriously.
just stock art in a
Or
card
the
game.
fandom is ravenous. Just never put that aside.
Yes to both,
Yeah.
sure. But I guess sort of getting back to my original point, it was really fascinating to me seeing sort of like being a lot of times, especially like in LARP and other things, seeing sometimes I'm like the only black person in this, subset of this fandom, or like in this chapter or whatever, and sometimes I would, go to certain events or certain games and be like, oh, great, well, this is where everyone's been hiding,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of like looking at, why do people engage with the fandoms they do and with the hobbies that they do? What is structurally in place there, or what happy mistakes do companies make and then run with when they realize they're striking gold with a certain demographic?
Yep.
I don't know. That's all just been really interesting to me, and that's sort of been a lot of my guiding compass, especially when I will look around and find, oh, well, I'm the only black person in this LARP chapter. How do I cope with that? B, make it my own. And to that end, I've been a lot of times the person to like organize the tournament, start the chapter, run the campaign, because a lot of times I've found in those circles, especially if you kind of stand out or are not just one of the people that will integrate immediately,
Mm-hmm.
one of the best ways that you can fit in is to make yourself invaluable. And one of the best ways you can make yourself invaluable is by producing content,
Mm-hmm.
which I just enjoy doing anyway. So lucky me.
Yeah. Um. So shifting gears slightly, but
Mm-hmm.
still, I want to keep on this broad topic, right? Of the ways in which particular fandoms and particular nerddoms can either unintentionally or intentionally become fairly exclusive along race lines, right? We've always had this.
And gender.
And gender, right? Gender is the one that I think was observed. This isn't even. It's not right to say. I think it got more attention first, right?
It
It's
was
not that
easier.
it was easier to point out. It's not that it was observed first, right? There have been black nerds forever. There have been people of color of every shape and stripe who are nerds for
I
as
mean,
long as
Mike
there have been nerds.
Pondsmith made Cyberpunk
Exactly,
2020.
right?
Like, yeah.
This goes way back, and yet we're still very much stuck in some of these cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think there is an awareness that's happening, but one, there's pushback. There's always pushback, unfortunately, and two, awareness isn't change, right?
Right. Yes. And I think a lot of times what ends up being the biggest sort of like boogeyman to having, diverse nerd spaces is a lot of the outreach. So like, for example, a lot of like the language that you'll hear, like, how do we achieve more diversity? How do we bring in diversity?
Yeah.
And it's more, and that language in and of itself, is a little bit telling of sort of what the issue is. And the issue is that there is a goal, and that is to bring in diversity. without necessarily a pointed understanding of how or even why to do that.
No, I mean it's essentially quotas.
In some ways, I'd say that there are some people who mean the best in the
Sure.
world. They genuinely want that for the right reasons. Because
Hmm.
they want to be exposed to different worldviews, because they want their community to be more accepting on the whole,
Hmm.
right? But a lot of times it is really still seen from that first person perspective, and not sort of the where is the motivation for this person to engage. Like, whenever I would enter like one of these circles, especially tighter ones,
Hmm.
it would be a bit of an initial uphill battle. But uphill battles are kind of just always been my thing. I moved around like what 5, 6 times before I was 18. So yeah, having to fight the social uphill battle was always sort of like second nature. But there are some people who don't want to jump through those hoops.
Hmm. And
There are
we
some people who aren't willing to spend the time as an outsider because they already have a place where they kind of belong.
and you can't expect it of people, right?
Well, I'd say you can. I'd say that if you're
Really?
going to, I'd say that if you're going to invite people into your house, you just have to do it in the right way.
Oh, sorry. I meant you can't expect people to want to fight that uphill battle.
Oh, you can't expect people to want to fight that uphill battle. No,
Yeah.
no, that's true. I'd say that there will be some, but I'd say that taking that expectation or taking that experience and just assuming that that will be the first reaction of everybody of that subset or culture, I think that the fact that you had one black person hit up your chapter in the last 2 months means that they are probably the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's bad or like that. I guess what I'm saying is, like, for example, in my program right now,
Hmm.
right, I'd say that there are a lot of different, I guess, and this isn't even among subsets of race. This is among subsets of income bracket, which we could talk about how those lines fall similarly. But what we're talking about is specifically about income.
Hmm.
A lot of times we will look around. So on the ground in Clinton Hill, we run, just shifting gears real quick,
Sure.
New York Society of Play runs after school programs and summer camp.
Hmm.
Right now, we are online running online Dungeons and Dragons for kids so they can reunite with their friends, be social, solve problems, what have you. Um, but one of the big things that we noticed was the demographic shift between our physical location, where there's about a 50-50 boy girl ratio
Hmm.
across like a diversity of backgrounds, right?
As
And
expected, given the physical area you're
given
located
we're
in.
in the middle of Brooklyn,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and it was at a sliding scale private school, like a sliding scale alternative teaching private school. So you have people from all economic and cultural walks of life, and it was really beautiful to see them sort of all play together and find common ground. And it's a school with like 80 kids, K to 12,
Sure.
so it's a very tight knit community anyway. But what that meant was that outsiders coming from other contexts, would see this and it would give them an immediate read on sort of like the group makeup and
Hmm.
I guess through that what the group must value in
Hmm.
certain ways, just inherently. Like racist or sexist talk is not really going to fly here just inherently by just the fact
Yeah.
that like half of these children are brown, half of these children are women. It just won't fly.
Yeah.
um, and we move on to online where we're just advertising Dungeons and Dragons as it is, D&D. And you're going to get three kinds of people. The first kind are people who just want to try something new,
Sure.
right? Who don't really know what's going on. The second are maybe some older kids or kids who have the very lucky, very few who have some sort of context, and it is possible at this point to have started playing D&D when you're like 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
You can do that. The third is parents who are scrolling through directories looking for something to do, and these are the parents who played D&D in the 80s and the early 90s. And if they played D&D in the 80s and early 90s, I'm going to call it an 80% chance they're white. You know,
Probably. Yeah.
um, and so you would see that in our demographics pretty clearly. In the transition from very diverse, very varied to, the benefits of being online are great. We have a farther reach.
Mm-hmm.
People can be connected over a longer
Mm-hmm.
distance, but at the same time, the signifiers that come with D&D as like a cultural pursuit, as a signifier,
Mm-hmm.
um, they um, they read in a certain way, and they come with certain they read differently to certain cultures and people who have had more exposure to it naturally,
True.
which means that that light bulb is going to go off. Oh, D&D is useful and good through firsthand experience. Is going to happen more, I guess, more often if you
Yeah, I mean,
spend
there's
a
there's
lot of
less
time
of
as
an
a kid doing
active
it.
pitch that needs to be made to that population.
Right.
Um, but that ends up creating, I think legacy is the exact right term for it, right? Because it's like legacy college students. Um, it's it's not to say that legacy isn't that bright. It's just that if they are equivalently bright, they already still have a leg up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly
Um,
that.
and that over time causes systemic imbalance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, that tends to fall along racial lines and gender lines. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, what you're doing now is pretty firmly RPG, right?
Well, we do a smattering of things. We are more of a traditional gaming. We're a family-based entertainment company
Sure.
that is focused mostly on non-digital games.
Hmm.
That's a little bit harder right now. We're doing the closest analog possible, but usually anything that is focused in non-digital games, whether that is boffer LARP, whether that is social games, whether that's board games,
Hmm.
crafts. A lot of times we like to over the
Interesting.
last year we had the kids make like a giant Jenga set out of discarded Amazon boxes, which was like a whole lot of fun. Um, but finding different aspects to tie into not only gaming but intergenerational play and
Okay.
social and emotional proficiencies. Because if you look at a lot of the ways that especially young children now have fun, they're very deep, very esoteric pursuits. Like you couldn't get like one of their 40-year-old parents to play Fortnite with them. They might get murked a couple times and just be like, "This is dumb. Can we
Yeah.
play something else?" So I think, and just how technology has developed even in the last 10 years, as far as entertainment and
Sure.
the language that children speak, as far as fun and entertainment, it's just developed into like this jargon that I don't think parents could even understand. Like if you took one of these Zoomer kids, gave them a laptop, and you were just like code, they'd be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
Which
So,
isn't just
uh,
sorry.
I was just thinking, like, okay, so there are games that we remember from our childhood, right? But like, there are games that I remember from like my adulthood, like Bioshock. There are people who are 13 years old now who weren't alive when Bioshock came out.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's
no.
so much has happened in the period where a lot of kids like they had no awareness, no reason for any awareness. Um, and these are things that we might consider like foundational pieces of games media for us.
Oh man, oh, DMing with kids is a trip, especially because sometimes you'll make like the perfect deep cut and you'll be like, "Oh wait, they don't understand this
Yeah,
one."
none of them were alive for it. Um,
Like yesterday, I had them. They had to look for a an awakened tree in the middle of the woods
okay,
because they wanted like +1 longbows. I was like, "Great,
sure.
find me the branch of an awakened tree. We'll make you some."
Hmm.
And it's funny, a funny coincidence. These kids are all from California. They're all
Okay.
Californians. So I had the tree do my best Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation. You cannot get the bough off my head, And they, uh, I don't think they realized like all of the Arnold Schwarzenegger references I was trying to make.
Yeah.
But then I was like, hey guys, the Governor Schwarzenegger. They're like, oh yeah, he talks like that. I was just like, wait a minute, they don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I need to tie this back in a way that they can
And that you
understand.
had to go with governor,
Right?
right?
Isn't that like the weirdest, like most clown world thing?
Yeah, and that's one. It's the most clown world thing because it's true, and two, it's like of all the things the guy has done, really, that's the referent point. Um, so okay, so you talked about getting started in CCGs,
Mm-hmm.
and frankly, I think given what you experience, it's always a little amazing to me when somebody fights that uphill battle starting at such a young age to stay involved and continues to fight it and like
Well,
successfully makes it into adulthood and still is a nerd. But like you not only continued, you branched out into all these other areas of nerddom. Um, you know, I when I first met you, I wasn't even really aware of your CCG past. I knew you primarily as like board and RPG. And then over time, I was like aware of like, oh, how broad LARP, all these other things. Like, what is the arc of involvement and like, yeah, just from 2008, right, is the last date I think you mentioned of starting to play Magic, and then I
mhm,
meet you 7 years later. What's
mhm.
those 7 years like?
Oh God. Well, college, of course.
Sure.
Graduated high school in 2010, so that dates me. But yeah, I guess it was like the beginning of I became an adult right at the beginning of the last recession.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't really a whole lot as far as like concrete, very promising career prospects.
Mm-hmm.
I think up to that point, I think I was understating a bit of my like fanboy energy up to that point. Like even before 2008, if we really want to go far back, I think the moment I became a fanboy was when I was 2.5 years old, really big into Thomas the Tank Engine, went to KB Toys, found out there was a season 2 run of engines that I'd never even heard of because Britain had gotten season 2 before we did. Just knowing that there was more stuff to know about stuff that I liked
Yeah.
flipped something off in my brain. Next thing you know, I'm into Power Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
Then one day they put on I guess like a B-list airing or like a B-side, which is like Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers, which is just a really bad dub of a season that never made it to America. And I was 4 at this point, and I was just like, what? You know? So it was just sort of always seeing those inklings of stuff to discover. Like at that point, of course, I didn't know that Super Sentai was something that had been going on for easily 25
Sure.
years, you know. But and then Pokemon hit and it was over. I was just
Yeah.
anything that there was more stuff to know about, I felt the need to like sort of delve into that and sort of even like the mythos that came with Pokemon of like this is a wild and mysterious world and there's so much to know and you can know it, was very much like I guess the franchise conceit that really lit the twinkle in my eye in that way. So yeah, I guess it's kind of just always been I've always kind of been a fanboy in that way. So trading card games were really just like the next logical step from there.
Sure.
Heck, man, I got really into Shonen Jump, so I was like selling my own comics for like ice cream money in middle school. That's like the other thing is I was able to find out that if I knew more about the stuff that everyone kind of liked but only had a casual interest in
Mm-hmm.
than like other people, I could maybe even find ways to like market that, make money off of that, and survive off of that.
Mm-hmm.
Which selling my really generic shonen anime in middle school or my shonen manga, that's what that taught me. I'd made about I tried to sell about two or three trading card games or CCGs to my classmates by the time we even got to 2008, where we're talking about Yu-Gi-Oh. So a lot of it was just like being like, I can be a content creator. I can have people appreciate the things that I make,
Mm-hmm.
and I can survive off of them, whether it's a tournament or a trading card game or a comic or, a piece of garb or like a sweet foam sword or whatever.
Sure.
One thing I notice is that other people think that their time is too valuable to spend lots of time making this stuff,
Yeah.
but they still like it.
And
So
they'll
why
pay
not?
for it.
Why not be that guy?
So
So that's like where the well, that's where I guess that's where the momentum for the uphill climb came from.
sure. So is that kind of how you initially? Is it just like a seamless transition of kind of hustling, creating the thing to hustling, teaching the thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was so when I was 18, again, job market was very limited.
Mm-hmm.
Summer Youth Employment Program in New York, it's a great resource if you're under 18. They put me in a summer day camp, and I realized I had a good knack for it. I liked working with the kids. The kids had the same enthusiasm for all of this dumb stuff that I did. So, of course, I liked working with them because they thought that the stuff that I had to say was important and not
Hmm.
like inane or meaningless. Uh, and that led to more of a natural transition of me sharing a lot of this stuff with
Hmm.
them being really into it, and then being able to demonstrate to people who were in positions to let me kind of do my own thing
Hmm.
that what I had was A, something that was fairly unique to their staff, and B, something that would offer something to these kids. And, for Dungeons and Dragons, I think people are sort of realizing that more and more, sort of some that it teaches like with that it helps with empathy and
Hmm.
problem solving and teamwork and all of that. But a lot of it has just been finding the value in these things that I am sort of like incessantly involved in. Just by intimately knowing those things and having done them a lot and having thought about their value. And then, you can really show kids value through most any real constructive pursuit.
Sure.
I mean, they have studies now that are saying that kids that were really into Pokemon, they're great at data categorization and attributing large strings of data to visual symbols.
Yep.
You can show a kid a Pokemon, they can tell you which two types it is, what are its moves, all of this stuff, how does it evolve, but that is a tool that the brain uses later as well.
Hmm.
You know, um, so yeah, I guess a lot of it was finding that you could make that argument or find that connection or dig for that benefit really with most anything that you're passionate about.
So let's talk about, yeah, the benefits, right? Because this is a thing we both believe in pretty deeply. This is a thing that we've both dedicated a portion of our life to,
Hmm.
and continue to do so. Um, you know, when you are instructing, when you're doing the work,
Hmm.
um, where do you find yourself either focusing the most or getting the most seamless benefits?
Hmm. So benefits for the kids. That's the beauty of an effective teaching tool.
Hmm.
Is that it can provide effectively across a variety of benefits.
Hmm.
And I think especially with RPGs, that's a very poignant element to them. Is that you can really bolster their feelings or their thoughts in one way or another, or serve to their detriment if you do it wrong.
Hmm.
I've seen RPGs turn as many children into little power gaming monsters as I have seen it turn people into thoughtful, well-adjusted, empathetic adults.
Oh yeah.
It's the force. There's a light side and a dark side. To that end, I feel like a lot of times when you're using gaming as a tool or any of these things that are very open to interpretation as a tool, whether that's like even if you look at like how Star Wars is interpreted across right and left leaning
Sure.
ideologies, that meme of like, oh, the only reason that you think Star Wars is SJW garbage is because you were part of the Empire the whole time. That whole meme,
Yeah.
things that people like, things that are easy to like. It's very easy to reconcile them with your worldview.
Hmm.
So that worldview kind of has to you kind of have to be cognizant of what you're promoting. So I think a lot of times what is touted as like a main benefit of RPG and children's education is the fostering of empathy and sort of like thinking of like who is this character and what do they want and how do I apply that mindset and that lens of thought to the outside world when thinking about how to be empathetic towards other people, right? And I'd say that in an ideal world that is perfect.
Sure.
I'd say currently our program is not as geared towards doing that. Right now, our program isn't particularly invested in the kids making a viable character that is a
Sure.
solid jumping off point for sort of like internal exploration or even just like more dynamics that might challenge them in life
Hmm.
as you would in a situation where everyone's coming into a classroom, everyone's low stress, life is happening as normal, then I think you can take that affect. Right now, what we're doing is we're allowing the children, and some people might find this sacrilegious, to act effectively as self-inserts that allow them to operate within a power fantasy,
Hmm.
right, with their friends. Because right now, I think that the thing that children need is agency,
Hmm.
right? I think that a sense of choice and the sense of power is extremely important if you're being trapped inside, like days and days and days on end, with limited social interaction. The other thing that you'll see is that these children have very limited social interaction with their friends. So anytime you get with these kids who are very, very excited to see each other, might not be the most constructive time. It might not be the most easy to direct time. Sometimes you might just end up having them romp around the city and like go shopping and maybe like find a very anachronistic pizza place. But maybe that's what they need right now.
Yeah.
Because they're trapped inside. Just like let them do what they want,
Yeah.
honestly, at a certain point. And there's something to be said for upholding like a social contract and like
Hmm.
having people realize, we can't have fun in an RPG without without widespread consent across the table, without us cooperating, without general respect for each other. All of that stuff is still on the forefront. But I guess the art of where of like where when a lot of people think where is the game here when it comes to RPGs, or like where is like the crux of why we're doing
Hmm.
this, a lot of times it is seen as more of an empathetic, more abstract pursuit.
Hmm.
And a lot of what we're doing is channeling some more what some would say paltry forms of entertainment, beat 'em up, fantasy, video game stuff that's very derivative of this stuff, but has taken away what some would consider a lot of the soul,
Hmm.
right? Um, and a lot of that is because specifically with D&D, it is such a powerful it's such a powerful cultural signifier, that it's the granddaddy to like every sword and sorcery IP, to like anything where there's magic,
Hmm.
taking some anything that has a fireball, is giving a brief nod and a tip of the hat to D&D. And these kids know that. They
Hmm.
just don't know what it is and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Every cartoon has a D&D episode.
Hmm.
I'd say maybe 15% of them accurately portray what tabletop RPGs are supposed to be.
Yeah.
So there are all of these like different expectations of like, oh, is it like Stranger Things? Is it like that episode of Gravity Falls? Is it like And it's the answer is no. It is like
It's
none
not
of the
like
above.
it's none of them or
It,
any particular one in any given session.
but it definitely influenced every single one of them, and that's just very confusing
Yeah.
for a kid who like doesn't really have any idea of like derivative works,
Hmm.
or like why they think Fight Club is bad and why people 30 years older than them think it's the best movie ever. Um, but yeah,
So
man.
you ended up kind of segueing on your own into the follow up question I had, which was kind of challenges of doing analog games in a quarantine landscape. Um, you kind of touched on how that really materially changes how you need to approach something like an RPG, right? That the aims are different because the emotional and attentional resources of the participants are different. They need something that is not what they would have needed 4 months ago, and not what they would have been pulled in by 4 months ago. Um, and who knows how much longer this lasts? Who knows how much more true that becomes as these people are stuck inside for so long? Um, you do more than RPGs, though, but currently you're just doing RPG stuff online. Is that a logistics thing? Is that a you kind of have a sense of how to do RPGs, but not yet the other stuff? Like, do you plan on expanding to have a broader range of all those different analog play things that you do otherwise?
Well, right now, what we're looking at this sort of new online world at is a brand new medium for like every conceivable kind of entertainment media, right? The way that people interact with the things that they like. Some of those things are just never coming back, or they're not coming back for a long time. Like trading card games are going to operate differently. I have a feeling a lot of trading cards are going to go different digital
Oh
because
yeah.
a trademark part of trading card games is sitting 3 feet away from someone who has bad hygiene and putting your grubby little hands over pieces of cardboard and plastic that they are going to then put in, a poorly ventilated dark space and then rub all over their face when they get home. You know, like um but it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it could
Um,
be Arena or Runeterra or any number of digital titles that are attempting to it.
Absolutely. And I think a lot more digital titles. I think we're going to see, I think a lot more paper titles are going to see, we're going to see them put a lot more backbone into their digital
Hmm.
releases. I think, even if you like look at concerts, I'd say that's sort of like kind of the same deal.
Sure.
Maybe how concerts are interacted with later, that's really going to change. So right now, what we're doing is with RPG, there's no experimentation there.
Hmm.
People have been doing online RPG for some time. It was markedly the less awesome of the two options between meeting personally and meeting online. So you
Sure.
kind of poo-poo it if you could invite all your homies over to your house on like a Saturday night and
But
like
the
do it.
tools existed.
But the tools existed,
Yeah.
and the effects were known, and
Hmm.
there was some testing and some footwork put out beforehand. So it seemed like a safer bet.
Hmm.
It wasn't like, how do we finagle having a board game and having everyone be able to play it and have it not be boring? It was like, we know how we can use this medium to sort of elicit the feelings and responses that we feel these children need right now.
Hmm.
So and it's a knowledge base that enough people have that we can conceivably seek out people and sort of let them do their own thing and have them add their expertise to sort of what we're offering,
Yeah.
because D&D is just a big enough thing.
Sure.
um,
It's everywhere. It's a thing that you can staff up without
yes.
having too much training.
Yeah. And so I guess right now where we're at is looking through all of the stuff that we offered and
Hmm.
looking at new stuff that we can offer through this medium.
Hmm.
So currently, what we're doing is we're doing our trial run of this on Memorial Day,
Okay.
but in sort of in line with the whole world changing, we're going to be doing our very first entirely online summer camp.
Okay.
And what that's going to look like is, and this is again like reaching out to two different, like several different demographics. There are the people that are going to be working from home, more white collar, right? Um, and their kids are going to be there
Sure.
with them. And then there are the people who are more blue collar or more manual labor. I see a world where a lot of these people are going to be leaving their children at home at a much younger age
Yeah.
because the alternative is to send them out with 300, 400 other kids, maybe catch a disease.
Yeah.
Maybe they bring home, I would honestly be rolling two rolls of the dice every day, one for whether or not you get sick and pass it on to your child, and whether or not your child gets sick
It passes on
out
to
here.
you.
And at
Yeah.
least for the next year, while we don't know how things are going to turn out, I see
Yeah.
this being a very valid and very well founded concern.
Yeah.
But what that means is that you have one group of people, like the white collar folk, who are looking for enrichment for their children. And then you have the blue collar folk who are looking for something to literally keep their children under some sort of adult supervision
Yeah.
so they don't have to feel terrible about leaving them home for 6, 7, 8 hours a
It's
day.
almost closer to babysitting.
Well, it doesn't have to be, but that's what
Sure.
people are looking for first and foremost. If
Well,
you're
yeah,
looking at an $80,
I meant what they want out of it, not what can be
oh,
provided.
yeah, for sure, yeah, and I think it's one of those things where you can say that you can say that you can have the exact same marketing, right?
Sure.
But if you have an $80 price point and a $40 price point, there are some people for whom the extra $40 wouldn't matter as long as it was an enriching program.
Hmm.
But then there are a lot of people whose first and foremost concern is, can I do this 5 days a week for my three
Sure.
kids? And when you get like a higher quality or things that are marketed as more of like a higher quality boutique specialized experience, that becomes less feasible,
Yeah.
even like when you're not looking at the numbers. So you really have to find that balance between I'm providing for people who want this and I'm providing for people who need it.
Yeah.
Now, once you get in the door, once you're in the camp, you're choosing electives, and that list of electives is growing all the time based on how we're researching how we can interact with this medium. So, like for example, we're going to do a TCG class, but we're going to be doing maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links or
Okay.
Hearthstone, something. We'll be doing, character study and world building classes.
Okay.
Again, we can do crafts, but all of our crafts are going to be, revolving around stuff like tape and cardboard.
Yeah.
That they're going to have, in an abundance around the house. During lunch, we're going to do screenings of good television so that the kids can gain some culture. And that's going to end up being 5 hour long blocks of supervision a day, and then 3 15-minute periods of unsupervised time around the house.
Okay.
If they don't show up to their class, we can call their parent, and their parent can call them and be like, "Why the heck aren't you at class?" In some indirect way, it is in some weirdly Orwellian way, you are being watched.
Sure.
But
I mean,
to a good
hey,
end, to
we,
a heartwarming end.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we're all gonna have to get comfortable with a slightly more Orwellian future
Oh.
in the wake of this, and however nightmarish that is, and will be for many people.
Mm-hmm.
End of the day, like, yeah, there is a point at which, like, the parent has to leave the house. They have to go to work. They didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to work from home. What are they
And at
supposed
that
to do?
and at that time, letting their kid out into the wide world might not be the smartest or most
Yeah.
attractive idea. Some people are definitely desperate to get their kids back outside. If I had a kid right now, I would not be doing that.
No.
So
But some people are. I mean, I get it. I live in a place that is significantly less cautious and has already begun opening up, and people are excited about it,
mhm. And
despite the numbers showing that they very much should not be.
they should not be, yeah. But I'd say that even there are going to be some people who want to go against the grain of that and maybe do what they perceive to be the smart thing. I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's the thing is at this point, whether people are opening up or whether people are not opening up, they're being presented with a choice.
yeah.
And we're
You
covering
were
one of those choices.
yeah, right. And I'm sure there are going to be programs out there that cover the other, that
Hmm.
say, screw it, you're not going to get
Yeah,
sick. Come on
yeah.
out. But for the people who take that other side, it's good. I mean, it's both good morally and ethically to give a choice to those people, and it's good business to be in the position to give the choice to those people.
And that's the thing is we were not at all comfortable putting these children in a position where they could be getting sick,
Hmm.
putting our staff in a position where they could be getting sick,
Yeah,
and really just helping bring about the fall of Rome here. I think that I think that providing a choice is super important here. And the beauty of it, right,
hmm,
is if we find out at some point towards the end of the summer that things are safe, there's nothing to stop us to transitioning to a physical model. Like if numerically they say things are fine,
sure,
that stuff has been done before. It's been researched. That ground has been broken, and we can follow on many already existing very successful models. From there, basically, we could snap and run and do that, or we could even do both things.
sure.
But I think right now, doing maybe the slightly harder thing where you're breaking ground, maybe the smarter thing because we really don't know when things are going back to normal.
No, we don't. We have no real idea. Um, okay, so changing track yet again. This is more something that I'm just kind of interested. So we've seen kind of the arc of your own fandom, nerddom
Mm-hmm.
to an extent, where it's led you communicating that to others, helping others find that same kind of passion. Um, but like, what gets you excited these days? Like, what's your current fandom?
Right now, man, my current fandom is my business because my business is a platform for all of the nerd stuff I want to do
Fair.
at this point. We were talking like a month ago about how last year I spent a good 12 months working on a LARP system
Mm,
called Hard Light Chronicle. And Hard Light Chronicle imagines a cyberpunk future with no guns, where any method of self-defense is like a hard light type thing, whether it's like a hard light baton or a
sure.
disc. Um, so it was like, what if cyberpunk with lightsabers, guys?
Sure.
Was basically like the premise. And the reason I really even got deep into that premise was because, I was spending a lot of time doing urban exploration of New York City. I've been living here all my life. And in doing that, I was realizing more and more every day, New York is one of the very few real life fantasy settings, along with like maybe San Francisco, LA, Hong Kong, Tokyo,
Yeah.
Paris, London.
London. Yeah. There
Yeah.
might be 10 in the world.
Yeah,
Um,
10 like real life fantasy settings
yeah.
that are so fantastical that people, sort of transpose their wildest fantasies onto them, right? And I'm living in one of them. And New York actually has a fairly weak LARP scene as far
Hmm.
as if you're looking at different metropolises
Oh,
across the
yeah.
US. If you're in Texas where you are, San Antonio, Austin, Boffer LARP is huge.
Yeah.
If you go up to Seattle, another nexus of gaming, LARP is huge there.
Yeah.
All along California, there's a larger amount of disposable income, which means that the quality of LARP up there is much higher. And up here in the Northeast, the I guess the crown jewel of LARPing is like New England, New Jersey, where there is a little bit more of, I guess, a robust nature setting. You have like these
Sure.
beautiful campsites and national parks, and it just lends itself really well to medieval role play.
Hmm.
Um, and the thing that I was realizing was it's just a very wasted opportunity because such a huge percentage of all cyberpunk media is based on, if not Los Angeles, then New York.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, why not have a LARP that utilizes its main geographical asset as a set piece? Because there are very few things that you can get that are more atmospheric than doing a cyberpunk LARP, in Chinatown at night, in New York City. I
Yeah.
mean, in 2020. I mean,
I have this thought about uh, World of Darkness LARPs, like Mind's Eye Theater stuff,
mhm.
a lot. Because I think that's the other thing that, like, there are so many times just walking down like the streets of the city or Brooklyn or Queens or whatever, I'm just like, oh yeah, 100% a vampire lives there, or
Yeah.
like, oh, that's like werewolf hunting grounds. Um, and yeah, it's always been so strange. Like, why do you think it is that there is such a dearth of LARP there? There's a theater community.
Well,
There
it's
are
because there are
nerds.
so many other things to do. If you look at a lot of these other places,
Sure.
especially in like small town USA, LARP is the closest you can get to fantasy or having some amount of
Sure.
fantastical element or that level of, I guess, real feeling drama in your life that at the
Yeah.
end of the day bears very little consequence to your actual livelihood. Like losing your job is drama too. It's just less fun, but
You're not
I mean,
wrong, but yeah.
yeah, man. I mean, so I kind of wanted to create something that utilizes that resource because we're like some of the only people in the world who can do that.
Hmm.
Um, and also because there the want is there. People here want to LARP. I can just tell you as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, took me about 3 years to find a viable LARP community just because there were so few of them here. So if I can use myself as an example and all of the people who are just like, man, I've been looking for a LARP forever. I'm so glad you guys are actually here. If I just count off of how many times I've heard that line, I can say that there are people who are very interested in LARPing. Like I got into LARPing because I saw role models in like 2007, and I was like, yeah, I got to do that.
Oh
I
man,
mean,
that movie.
dude, I cringe at it now, but like it was exactly what 16
No,
year old me
I
needed.
get it. I get it. Paul Rudd realizing that he actually enjoys LARP. Like, yeah,
Well, no, it was also just realizing that there are kids like the LARP kid, and it's like that's fine.
that's
You
fine. It's
know,
okay to be like that.
your people are out there. You know, and seeing that that kid was able to find his people
Yeah.
was really, I think, the most, not it wasn't even like the swords and the sorcery. I think that was like the most inspiring takeaway, and really what inspired me to like go down the whole art path was being like, there are lots and lots of people out there, who want to do this too.
Hmm.
And if they aren't out there already doing it, screw it, you can make it and they'll come.
Yeah.
And I mean, like that was sort of like the leading energy behind me starting the Hunter Live Action Role Play Club, which was like another little block there. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as the cyberpunk LARP is
Yes.
concerned, we got as far as we could with it. Really pretty system based off of players running events and getting XP for running great events.
Okay.
It goes off of like a pseudo Facebook interface. So like
Interesting.
when people run events, it shows up on the Facebook event calendar for your character's profile. So your character's
Okay.
profile sheet's like a Facebook profile,
Sure.
and then they have their friend list, and then they have certain events that they can see and certain events that people can't see. Maybe if you're a part of a certain faction, you see the invitation to like an underground concert that's happening at this person's house.
Cool.
Everyone who goes to the concert's going to get XP, but maybe I, as the GM, will wrestle up some people to play as cops and try and bust the whole place down. But like trying to create like a living world that is worthy of New York as a set piece. But then sort of coming to that hard stop and being like, there's no way that I can implement this. There's no way that I have the resources to make this happen. Fast forward like 2 years later, I'm working. Oh, hey, Doggo. I'm
Yeah,
working on
doggo.
this company, and all of a sudden we sort of have a platform for this to happen through. And that's what gets my blood pumping, is knowing that all of these projects that I might have had to shelve because there weren't resources, or any new projects that I might get excited about.
You can
It's
do
not
them.
like
You can do them
it's
now.
not like I just do it as a labor of love until I can't, and then I shelve it and get sad.
Hmm.
It's like it's like there's a legitimate someday there,
Yeah.
and that's really kind of what's lighting my fire right now, because
I.
everything
Yeah.
else, the TCGs, the RPG, that's all work now, is the thing. So there's only so much I can genuinely
Oh
enjoy
yeah.
it on my free time.
Yeah.
It is the
Yeah.
trap,
This
as I'm
is it,
sure you
it
know.
is. It's a trap. It's the most insidious trap. It's
Oh,
like I make games. It's great. I love it when new people come into the hobby. Please always bring in more new voices. It makes everything more interesting. But God, turning it into a job. Um, it's like keep one section of it that's not work so that you still have something to enjoy.
oh yeah.
Um, okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I
Um,
mean, yeah, we're
cool.
this is
Go.
great. I mean, honestly, no, I'm just saying, like, thanks for
Oh,
having me. This has been like really fun. This has been a solid conversation. But
I'm
yeah,
glad.
no, I think God, you've been what have you been writing lately? Honestly, I'm interested.
In terms of actual like creative output, very little. This book, these series of interviews that are going to become a book, is the big one right
Mhm.
now. I don't know. I've kind of become just like an old head in the scene, um, where like I just exist. I am around. I am to some people a known quantity, be it positive or negative. I shitpost. I am part of the discourse, but my creative output has, I don't know. I have a very good friend who who regularly refers to me as the most knowledgeable person in RPGs who doesn't make anything. Um,
I could agree with that.
yeah, and it's like it's just a niche I occupy now. I don't know. I at some point graduated from person making the thing to person studying the thing to just, I don't know, person existing in a substrate.
No matter what content creators will say, we need critics.
I agree. In fact, this is my personal high horse. That much of what you've said today is stuff that I am firmly in agreement with regarding kids and I don't want to call it diversity because it's a broadness of views and people, right?
Mhm.
A rich creative environment, all these things.
It's the cultivation of accepting spaces for children.
Yeah, right. For children and adults.
Yes.
Because it's not like when you grow up you suddenly don't need that anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
but my personal high horse, my like tiny little hill that I will forever die on, is the belief that until we have a legitimate ongoing critical apparatus, we won't really be a foundational media. We
That's
can
fair.
we can grow and grow and grow, but we, on some level, stay at the point of kick the can or hula hoop until we have a critical apparatus. Um,
Yeah, I mean, because it is very unregulated. It's very Wild West. You know, anyone can write anything about anything.
And that's the thing is
Um,
like that is great for the creator
hmm
because it's how you get all these weird art games and these
hmm
explosions of new ideas and new mechanics. Um,
But it's also how you get shit like Scramble for Africa.
yeah,
You know?
exactly. Right? That there's so much tasteless shit because on some level there's nobody to say that it is until it's too late. Um,
And you know, if somebody does say it's shit, there's no precedent for them to be taken seriously on the level of like a movie critic, a
yeah,
literary critic, a journal critic. You know,
I
yeah.
I wanted to be a film director when I was a kid,
hmm
and on top of watching every film I could get my hands on, I read every critic I could get my hands on. Because when I was a kid, I didn't have any idea what was good. I knew what I liked, but I couldn't
hmm
put words to why I liked it. And it took critics to help me find that,
Right.
to find the language to express what I enjoyed about a shot, what I what made me think somebody's acting was as powerful as it was. Um, there is I don't know. There's so little in that regard in analog games still, despite the creative outpouring and the massive explosive growth.
Oh,
Um,
for sure. But I think that critics have definitely, if it's not like a front and center influence, they've had a hell of a significant influence in how role-playing games and TTRPGs are sort of penned. Like, take if you take a look, and you used to be a Paizo guy, right?
yeah, I mean,
If
back when.
if you take a look at the difference in the nomenclature used in Pathfinder versus Pathfinder
Mm-hmm.
2E, it is so huge.
Sure.
Even just doing away with the terminology of races
Mm-hmm.
and calling them like backgrounds. You know, I'd say that that was a product of not if not of like one, you know, very influential thought piece, a lot of smaller comments and thoughts and
Sure.
criticisms on the medium saying that they recognize that as like a dated you know, trapping of the genre. And just seeing that, you know, hearing the first thing that my very excited friend told me when they were trying to sell me on 2E was,
Mm-hmm.
yes, the feat system's great, but also they changed all the nomenclature around race and stuff. And I was like, that's extremely intriguing to
It
me
is. And
because it hasn't been done really.
it well, it hasn't in a trad book, right?
Yes.
I'd be lying if I said that like it was something dramatically new.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just they were the big boys who did it first. Um, I will say that I think there's a material difference between criticism and critique,
hmm
right? And
And
the
I think you'd be able to better identify that than me for sure.
sure, sure. I guess very broadly, when when 1,000 people point something out, that's a really good indicator of something, right? Whether or
hmm
not you need to listen to those 1,000 people, I don't know, but it's a sign that something is eliciting a common reaction, and that's probably something that's worth investigating. But that fills a very different role within a culture, right? Like, there's a difference between Roger Ebert saying something
hmm
and 1,000 DC fans saying they want the Snyder Cut,
hmm
right? Like, and it's not that Ebert's more knowledgeable that marks him out as distinct, right? He is, but that's not the point of occupying the space of the critic, right? I think we have that version of the 1,000 screaming voices wanting the Snyder Cut.
hmm
Um, we have, as probably it's probably called, the discourse, right? We have critique small c. We don't have critique big C. Um, I think we're impoverished without it. I think we have something that can help move us forward, but I don't think we have all the parts.
Would you say that the thing that's keeping us from critique with a big C and keeping us from the sort of like that Ebert level,
Mm-hmm.
would you say that the thing that makes Ebert his, I guess, his knowledge of a larger body of works than most other people who would be making similar opinions, so he can make an opinion from, I guess, a more storied or a more informed place, having surveyed lots of other similar media, therefore having maybe a more grounded point of reference.
Part of it is expert power, right? That's what I would call it.
Okay.
The grounding of knowledge, of historical knowledge. But I don't think it's an individual thing, right? Because if I were to look at like the broader blog scene or whatever, there are people out there who are substantially well read, who have done the legwork to have the same kind of grounding as a critic in any other medium. Um, I think it's a cultural difference between most media and fandom media.
Okay, no, I get that because I guess fandom media elicits a lot more maybe casual responses.
There's
Um,
casual responses and a fervor and like really ardent defense of what you love,
mhm,
right? Like
mhm.
there are films I love, but I can hear a measured critique of them in a way that if you were to talk about like my favorite games,
Mhm.
I might fight you.
Oh yeah, but that's part of what makes fandoms like. That's the thing is, I guess because there is a little bit less of a canonized definition of what is good
Sure.
in games and all of that stuff. I feel like it opens up a freer discourse that is maybe rooted more in feelings than in
Yeah.
fact
Yes.
or in convention, which I think is really maybe the appeal of, because
It is.
trust me, man, I grew up having nerd rage fights. And honestly, really, it really kneecapped my ability to have a constructive discourse about certain things for a lot of my college years
Yep.
because the thought was, growing up in these locals, if you like something, even if you really like the person, at least kind of pretend that you're fighting about it.
Yeah.
Tell them that they're smoking crack for thinking Final Fantasy IV is better than Final Fantasy VI. Go for it.
Just throw it out there. Why not?
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably
Um,
good that you do. Um,
because that actually it brings to light saying that is the gateway to a whole discourse about what is Final Fantasy, what should it be, what do these versions do differently,
yeah.
how do they appeal to different people. I mean, even just like going up to a group of nerds asking them Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy VII is going to open up such a huge like tell all about like the kind of person they are how they grew up. Even just the fact that if you prefer Final Fantasy VII, you very likely grew up with a PlayStation. If you like
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy VI, you very likely grew up with a SNES.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And what
and
that can say, like you could have been basically the same age, but it
yeah,
has it gives a lot of information.
speaks volumes. Yeah.
And I mean, I think of this a lot in terms of like the critique often made of social skills in D&D, right? How they're basically combat skills, but for conversations.
Hmm.
Um, they don't represent how people really move through a discussion or something like that.
Hmm.
Except when you kind of realize that like the whole thing about fandom and this type of nerddom is like conversation by way of combat.
Oh well, that's just because if nerds have to find a way to be better than each other.
Yeah,
We have to know who's the best nerd.
it's
Um,
about like the most inane shit, but we still have to know.
Oh yeah, no, and that's the thing is like that's sort of like the I think that comes back to sort of just like the how intelligence is commodified in our communities. And it's not even intelligence, it's knowledge that's commodified.
Hmm.
It's knowing the most stuff. You can have a brick for a brain, but if you know the first issue that every X-Men came out in, you're still kind of a god,
Yeah,
you know? Um and you can own that and you can put that front and center by dragging like the discourse to a place where there's always the ability to drag discourse to your home field, to where
Hmm.
you know more knowledge than others. And I think that sort of creates an inherent sort of belligerence to
Totally.
nerd conversation. And I think I heard this one really great saying, which is a young nerd gets defensive when somebody presents them with information they do not know, whereas an older nerd who's gotten past that is excited when they're presented with information they do not know.
Hmm.
And I think those two stages are like, growing up in like the hot chemical soup of like screaming nerd rage.
Yep.
Uh, definitely, definitely teaches you to be passionate about your ideas.
Hmm.
But like, I'm 6'6".
Yeah.
When I got to college and I was, heading up subjects with that same energy, it was freaking people out. You know,
Yeah.
and like yeah, it's just a very stark difference between how nerds commodify intelligence and what knowledge counts as valuable, versus and which might be part of why nerd communities are so insular.
Totally.
It's a mode of communication that really really works there and really super doesn't like anywhere else.
Yeah. I mean, you when you come up in that kind of world, you have to learn two entirely different modes of interaction if you want to have any success in the world,
Oh
right?
yeah.
You have to know how to interact with the people who are on your level, and that is basically fighting. And you
Hmm.
have to interact with the people who don't get that.
You have to have
Um,
your normie persona, or else you're going to scare everyone.
yeah, I mean,
Because your nerd persona is a crazy person. I
every
guarantee it.
every every nerdy kid learns to code switch.
Oh yeah.
You have to.
And that's actually the beauty of it. As a biracial person, I think that's why nerddom really appealed to me, because go living in six different places before 18 and being biracial. Two black for the white kids, two white for the black kids. You really had to learn how to like tone switch really, really proficiently
Yeah,
right away. Like once I moved to California, I had to learn how to stop sounding like I was from Miami. Once I moved back to New York, I had to learn how to stop sounding like I was from California. You know,
yeah,
um, but I guess it's one of those things where like nerd stuff is the same everywhere, but also being able to tone switch, like being able to talk like a trading card game player and have like those mannerisms
hmm,
and stuff, very different from talking like an MMO player, a LARP player, any of that other stuff. It's all a form of code switching. So I guess it's one of those things where you can sort of don your knowledge as your persona in a
yeah,
certain way. You are what you know, or you are what you like, uh, which is a lot easier than not knowing really what you are or where you belong.
absolutely,
Which
abso-fucking-lutely.
I don't think that's just me. I think that's every weird little outcast who got into comics or cards or
I
whatever.
think that's every jock. I think that's every child pretty much flat out, regardless of their interest. It
Hmm.
is easier when you don't know who you are to become the thing that you are good at or that you enjoy than to suffer through the pain of not understanding who you are.
Oh yeah. I mean, like going to these new places, no matter where I went, I was still the kid that knew just a little bit more about Pokemon than most kids. I was like getting the Japanese scans of like things that were going to be coming out in like 6 months and like regurgitating that information. And that was kind of like how I gained my cultural capital
Yeah,
among these kids. But yeah, no, I think that's this is like a big rabbit hole that I think a lot of nerds will resonate with.
yeah, I think so too. Um, I will say it seems like things are slowly changing for the better. It seems less combative than it
Yeah.
did when we were kids. It seems less hateful. It's still there, right? It's
Product of
not
the times though.
totally, totally
Yeah.
product of the times. Um, and I hope it is a continuing trend.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to who's creating the content, because whoever's creating the content has the power. You
Yes.
know, um, the fact that Frank Miller isn't making Batman anymore means a lot for Batman for the rest of forever.
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I mean? That means that Batman isn't going to be written by freaking Frank Miller, which means that Batman's never going to be that level of like being like the poster boy for edgy.
Hmm.
and making like the Punisher look like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Um, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And that has more to do with who's writing Batman,
Hmm.
or like, who's writing My Little Pony, or who's writing this other
Steven
IP,
Universe or
Steven
whatever.
Universe. Yes, it's who's creating the content,
Hmm.
because the people who are creating the content are sort of dictating the tone of the conversation.
Hmm. Totally.
Oh yeah,
All right. Uh,
yeah, man.
I
Great
think this is a
conversation. I love
yeah.
this.
Likewise.
Yeah,
I think this is a good stopping point. Thank
yeah,
you. It was good seeing you.
yeah. Good seeing you
Um,
too, dude.
Good luck with everything. I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Yeah, dude. We'll definitely be in touch.
All right. Well,
All right. Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me, Joe.
no, my pleasure.
Yeah,
All
man.
right.
Good luck with the rest of your interviews. All right.
Thanks, man.
See ya.
Peace.
Bye.